Hello and welcome to episode 102 of Can We Still Be Friends, a podcast that tests the limits of the friendship between two people who mistake movie taste for personal morality. I'm Nate Goss, here with Ryan Ebling. For this episode, we let the Academy of Motion Picture Arts and Sciences pick our movie. So we're discussing this year's Best Picture winner, CODA. We both had seen CODA in the run-up to the Oscars, but we wanted to see what a rewatch reveals when we aren't watching it as part of a frantic session of cramming any and all nominated pictures.
CODA has been a huge hit with audiences, even before its 3 nominations and wins at the Oscars, and it has broken ground all over the place. It's the first streaming movie to win Best Picture, Apple paid the highest price for distribution out of any Sundance movie ever, and it is the first Sundance movie to win Best Picture. But more impactfully, the film's story of a deaf family and the performances by deaf actors have been an important space for representation of deaf people in mainstream Hollywood movies. The Oscar win by Troy Kotsur is huge for the deaf community and the general population to see deaf representation and success.
And among all that beautiful success, how is the movie itself?
Is it all we need to get by? Keep listening.
Most people who are terrified of singing don't sign up for a choir.
Other kids make me nervous. I used to get made fun of. I talked funny when I first started school.
You're the girl with the deaf family? Everyone but you?
Yeah.
And you sing. Interesting. Are you any good?
I don't know.
All right, so of course that was a clip from the movie we are discussing today, CODA. That was Ruby, as played by Emilia Jones. Coming back to her choir teacher.
Bernardo.
I am not going to say that today because I've never been able to roll my R's.
Oh, no?
And that's definitely something he makes a point of saying not to even try.
By Eugenio Derbez.
Yeah, Eugenio Derbez is the choir teacher. She had previously been so shy about singing that she ran out of the class. And so this was her coming back and trying her second chance, I guess.
Yeah.
So CODA.
CODA.
Best Picture winner. You know, we talked in our last episode about how the Academy was going to decide our episode. And so this is what we're talking about as selected by the Academy.
And we said that we had worked it out through our lawyers. They weren't going to mention us on the night.
Right.
And that was your idea. I wasn't sure. I mean, after that night, what a great idea to keep our name out their mouths. Right?
That's right. I just knew it. I knew.
You had a sense.
I had a sense. That,
I thought it. I didn't show it in the last episode, but I questioned it. I said, it might be a good
Ryan,
thing. I didn't.
They need to keep our names.
You said those words, so I was shocked on Oscar night.
Right.
When Will Smith borderline quoted you.
It was a bit of deja vu.
It was.
That show had enough drama to it already, right?
Yeah.
To the point where, and I'm actually kind of being serious here, to the point where, like, it's actually really unfortunate that nobody is actually talking about who won Best
CODA,
Picture
right.
At the Academy Awards.
Yep.
Whether you like the movie, love the movie, or think it was just okay, like, the point is pretty much every other Oscars year, like, when something wins,
everybody talks
about it for the next few days, you know, and it gets some attention. And
it really is too bad, especially because there were a lot of monumental winners.
Yeah. And of course, Troy Kotsur. But like, even if you were watching the show, his moment was totally
just
like
clouded.
Should have been the moment of the night. That should have been what people were talking about.
You know who nobody was talking about Monday morning?
Can we still be friends? That's right.
And that is because you knew.
Made sure of it.
I
made sure of it.
Yeah.
But we're not here to talk about this partnership we had with the Academy. We're here to talk about CODA.
Yeah, CODA. So, I mean, how do you...
Well, okay, so let's just do... I think we should just maybe do what we normally do.
No, I was going to say, I feel weird about this because there are things about CODA that are tremendously important. That, like, for the deaf community, this is huge. For deaf children, seeing the Troy Kotsur win an Oscar, I mean, that's enormous. But at the same time, the first time we watched this, I don't think either of us thought too much of it.
Other than what you just said. I mean, I think we were aware of that.
Yes.
You know, I think we were aware of that sort of importance of the movie. And, you know, I don't even really like to use that word because honestly, it kind of makes it so that you're not really talking about it as a movie. You're just kind of talking about it, what it does for the idea of movies and the idea of art or certain communities. But yeah, I mean, like, this is the thing, and maybe we should just kind of back up and talk about first viewings. And, you know, it's a recent movie, so first viewings is still going to be just like, I watched this, about a month ago or so. Just by its nature of being a small indie family drama was not going to be typically high on my to-see list unless people were talking about it, because that is just, I've seen a lot of it, you know? And so for a movie within that sort of, if you want to call it a genre or whatever, it has to have something really unique going for it, I think, for me just to naturally say, yes, I want to see that. That is definitely one I want to see.
Even, would you say, and this isn't a gotcha question, would you say beyond the unique story it's telling?
Well, let me ask you this as a part of that.
Oh, you're not going to answer. Okay.
As a deflection, let's say it's the exact same movie as far as like what it's tackling, the themes it's using, the people it's representing.
So you mean like a teen coming of age movie?
Teen coming of age movie. I'll even say a teen coming of age movie about a teen growing up in a household of
as a child of
deaf adults. Yeah. Would this have been a movie you would have sought out if there was no buzz around it?
I would have been curious, but probably not especially. Like if I had watched the trailer, like that sort of thing, probably not especially.
Because to be honest, I don't even think I heard about this movie until it was nominated.
I had heard about it. I had heard that, you know, this Sundance buzz around it, like the winter before.
Yeah. And this is neither a...
we're just being honest.
Yeah, no, this is... Yeah, we're not even getting into how we feel about the actual movie. I'm just trying to sort of talk about, like, actually, this was one of those movies that... It was one of the last ones I saw as far as the ones I really wanted to catch up with. I went into it a little bit more kicking and screaming just because the cynical part of me saw this as... Well, first of all, that you had to have Apple TV to get it, to watch it.
Yeah.
Okay, so even to watch this movie, I've got to add another streaming platform to my already large list of streaming platforms I subscribe to. And I kind of saw it, this is the cynical part of me again, I saw it as like, oh, this is just Apple's strategy.
Yeah, algorithm.
This is their way of looking at the data and saying, this is a movie that I think could put Apple TV more on the map.
Yeah, representation's in the conversation, so we got a movie that has representation.
Right. And then you saw how much they spent on the movie, $25 million.
Just to distribute.
Just to distribute it. I mean, you know, I don't even know how you'd calculate it, but they're probably not going to really ever kind of make that money back in any way.
It only made $1.5 million in the theater.
Right.
Because it has to have a theatrical release to
be up for the awards, yes.
But kind of side conversation, they're planning, I believe, on re-releasing it into theaters, which is interesting. It's the flip of the way things have worked before, which is get it into theaters, get an audience, get it Oscar nominated, get the buzz generated. Now it's sort of like stream it, get the buzz generated, get the nomination, then put it in theaters.
Yeah, and actually, like now that you mentioned that kind of stuff, it sort of is also this other thing that I feel like is kind of unfortunate about CODA. Another reason people won't actually talk about the movie is because they're going to talk more about like, what does this mean for streaming? What does this mean for the business? You know, there's just so much about this movie that is working against it actually being talked about as a movie.
Right.
And just, what do you think about that movie?
Right.
Going back to, I kind of strayed a little bit, but going back to the idea of like, this was one that I really only watched to check off the list.
I did, when I was hearing more about it, I was curious. I was like, oh, that might be a pretty good movie.
Yeah. And I don't know if you want to get into like how you were the first time you watched it.
So I saw all 10 nominated movies, Best Picture nominated movies before the Oscars. I would have put CODA pretty well in the middle of what I saw. Let me just, for a moment, unnecessarily take Belfast to task. That was the worst of the 10.
I didn't see it.
I
So
really
can't
couldn't
comment.
stand it. I thought it was so weak. I don't know. I really didn't like Belfast. But it was, kind of in the middle of fighting for 5 and 6 with Dune for me.
Of the best picture.
Of the best picture movies.
Not
Yeah,
all the
yeah,
movies
yeah.
you've seen.
No,
for the
no,
year
no,
or
no.
anything. Yeah.
But I also couldn't tell if I was watching it with Best Picture nomination backlash.
Sure.
Oh, yeah, this movie's fine, but is it better than all these other movies that I would say didn't get nominated, That's not fair, to the movie. So I guess basically when I first saw it, I thought it was a pretty conventional coming-of-age teen story with the unique and necessary and important aspect of the representation for deaf people and deaf actors, which this movie is a remake of a French movie. And that movie, 2 of the actors weren't deaf, but they, played deaf people. And so this movie did it better. Everybody who,
And from what I read, they kind of had to fight for that. Like Marlee Matlin, who's the mother character in this,
and
she's an Oscar winner. She's been in tons of stuff. I knew her actually most as the as Jerry's girlfriend in the Seinfeld episode.
Oh yeah,
where she plays a deaf girlfriend of his,
Yeah.
and of course in Seinfeld fashion, they're all self-involved jerks who just only see her as having a superpower that she can read lips from across the room. That's how I mostly knew her. But anyways, what I read was that she was kind of brought into the project pretty early, and a lot of the people who were the financial backers of the movie kind of scoffed at the idea of hiring all deaf actors to play the deaf parts.
Mm-hmm.
And she just said, if you don't do it, I'm walking. I will not do it. So it was mostly because of her sticking to her guns on that, that's what we have.
That's great.
So yeah, that is huge.
And I also want to say that I think it's possible to acknowledge the importance and respect the step forward and, be there for that and say that the movie itself is fine.
Yeah, right.
But to kind of jump to current viewings or rewatches, I really was trying to just put the fact that it won Best Picture aside. And I just tried to watch it as a teen coming of age movie, do the Roger Ebert thing, sort of just say in this genre, what's this movie doing? And I did enjoy it. I felt like I was with it a lot more the second time. What about you?
I will say, even the first time I watched it, I was pleasantly surprised. I was like, this is a good movie.
Yeah, it hits the beats. And
it hits the beats. And I will say, and even compared to movies that I probably, as far as, overall feeling ranked a lot higher, this one probably emotionally hit me.
Mm-hmm.
Crying a little bit more than some of the movies that I might even rank higher for the year. In that way, it was effective. And, watching the family interact and watching the family dynamics in the sign language was new and was different and was something that I really liked watching on the screen.
Mm-hmm.
But if you go to my Letterboxd, which, we always encourage people to do that, follow us on Letterboxd. I actually just, right at the beginning of the year, I just start ranking every movie I see for the year. And that list moves around all throughout the year. So if you go to my Letterboxd, and you look at my movies of 2021 ranked, you'll find it's kind of like you said, right dab in the middle. I saw over the whole year, I saw 34 films from 2021. And this is prior to my second viewing. I could probably bump it up a few, but it's number 20 right now. It's it's not even top 10. I appreciated some things in it more the second time I watched it, but I'll tell you, if we weren't assigned this by the Academy,
right,
I don't think I would have given it a second viewing. I don't know that that's fair or not, but I probably wouldn't. I probably would have been like, yeah, it's a good movie. Everyone should go see it. It's a good sort of even Friday night kind of date movie. It's not too long and it hits all the beats, like you said, and it'll make you cry a little bit at the end and you'll be happy. It just kind of does what it needs to do, and it does a lot of what something like This Is Us does for people or Parenthood does for people, who watch those kind of shows. And I don't knock that, but even after the second viewing, we should probably even do star ratings, I guess. I would probably just give this it's a 3.5 star movie to me.
That's where I was.
It's good. It's good, but it's conventional. And with those conventions, there are some conventions that even in this movie drive me up the wall. And then there are other conventions that I'm like, this is exactly what I want in a movie like this. And
Right.
it does it beautifully. It does it so well. And I am with the Ruby character, and I am understanding her dilemma, and I am like seeing that through this lens of the specific dilemma of being a CODA. That is a fresh perspective on this, what is actually a pretty conventional film.
Right.
You know?
Yeah, definitely. And it adds to it. It's not just a thrown in aspect of, oh, how do I set this movie apart? Oh, I'll make her a child of
Deaf adults, yeah.
And, there's also part of me that says, like, great that a very clear genre movie won Best Picture. You know?
Sure.
Granted, I would love for, horror to get its due, or, like some other genres potentially. But, like, you've probably seen this as a librarian, that like YA fiction is becoming much more critically recognized, you know? And
deservedly so.
Yeah, right.
Yeah.
Exactly. And I teach AP Lit, and they add YA stuff to their list of books of literary merit now. And that's good, And so there's part of me that's like, I don't love like teen coming of age movies, all of them. There are some great ones. And I usually, though, they get ignored because you can say, oh, that's just a teen coming of age movie, And I think there's something to be said for the second year of a pandemic, in the midst of looming World War III, potentially. Sure. A movie that's happy is what we want to say. That's the movie of this year that we want to recognize, Something that ends with just an expression of love.
Yeah. I do wonder, this is a teen coming of age story.
Mm-hmm.
You're a high school teacher. Maybe you would be able to speak on this a little bit better than I. I mean, we don't even have box office returns to kind of look at.
Yeah.
But are teens watching this? Or is it kind of a teen coming of age story that's like really just for like adults and like kind of prestige festival kind of watchers? You know what I mean?
Yeah. Like, any students of mine who've seen it liked it.
Okay.
But I think if it were on Netflix, a lot more of them would have been watching it.
Yeah.
I don't think teens would go and get Apple to watch this movie.
I agree. And I don't even think, and this is where I kind of want to talk about this, even though I do want to talk mostly about the movie. One thing that just really ticks me off about the whole kind of like this being Apple's, you can just kind of see Apple's strategy in this is like, okay, they've got a Best Picture winner on their hands. You can go on Apple TV today and it's like 6 on their list of like featured things to watch. And I don't know what this says about movies in general, that Apple even is just like, yeah. Because if you go there right now, I mean, and I thought maybe this was just like my algorithm, but no, because it's recommending shows I've already completed and watched. So I think this is just their general, everybody sees this, most
Top
popular
movies.
stuff featured. Number 1 is Severance, then it's Ted Lasso, then it's Slow Horses. I don't even know what that is.
It's a new show that they've got.
Then it's We Crashed. Then it's The Morning Show. And then you see Best Picture winner CODA. And so to me, it's like Apple can just kind of throw all this money at a movie, go ahead and win Best Picture with it, and then be like, yeah, well, if it does something, it does something. If not, well, we'll just throw money somewhere else. And, right now, I just, as someone who loves movies specifically, like, I see this on all streaming platforms. They're just kind of like burying movies.
Yeah.
Period. Like it's all kind of about series and TV shows for the most part. If it's a platform that does all of that.
Right.
You know?
Well, I mean, this is getting super cynical. But like a TV show gets 10 views.
Right.
Whereas a movie gets 1.
Yeah.
And so this is kind of the story of CODA, where
it's like kind of sad, and I want to be like, no, we need to champion this thing.
Where the movie itself gets buried in, like you said, the conversation about streaming, taking over, finally winning Best Picture. It's just there's so much conversation about the movie,
right,
rather than the movie itself, and we're doing that right now.
So let's get into some of the details here. So let's. I mean, we could stay positive. One thing that I thought, like, as far as just what you're watching and what Sian Heder doing here, that some of the choices that she is making. One of them I really appreciate is you've got a lot of scenes here of a family having conversations.
Yeah,
and they are just shot like you would shoot any other family having a conversation in a movie. It's just that it's all being done in American Sign Language, with the exception of Ruby maybe saying some of her lines out loud. And this time around, I really paid attention. It is never, I mean, there are certainly other areas of this movie where they are doctoring the hell out of it with music and score and really trying to like tell you and telegraph to you, this is the emotion we want you to feel right now with the music.
Right.
They pretty much cut the music out entirely during all of the family communication scenes.
Right.
And just let the actors be actors. And you hear and I know this is like, I don't, for someone who is hearing, like me, it's kind of like, well, that's a privilege for me to get this experience that a person who's deaf wouldn't get. But like, even for me, I love the sound design of hearing the hands slapping against each other.
That's what I really noticed this time, that like, you hear their exhalations, you hear their hands slapping. Like you just, as a person who hears, you hear the rhythm and the sound of that communication that like, I don't know, when I was watching it, it felt, the word that came to me was like, it's a brave choice.
Yeah.
But it's just like,
it's just appropriate.
Right.
It's the appropriate choice. And I like that Sian Heder didn't feel the need to like hold anyone who's hearing's hand in this, you know?
Because truth be told, you can't control people's reactions to that. And there are people who it could make uncomfortable to be hearing those. There are people who could think it's funny, like something that's sort of silly. There are people who could think it's, I don't know, sad or but that's I think why I would say why the word brave came to me is because making that choice is really unprecedented for the most part in movies. And to just trust the actors, trust the story, trust the filmmaking to say, no, regardless of how people react to this, whether it makes them uncomfortable and then their subsequent reaction, we're going to do this the real way. Like, we're going to just show the reality of it.
And the reality of it is this very tight-knit, loving family.
Right.
And you've got just, I mean, you know, Troy Kotsur obviously won the award for it. I think extremely deserving.
Yeah.
I mean, it is an incredible performance. That character is great. The character of Frank, the dad. But you know, Marlee Matlin and Daniel Durant, just, I mean, it is such great casting.
They were all three incredible.
They're so good, all of them. And they all get their kind of time to shine in the movie. And it's different emotions too. Like the scene between Ruby and Leo, that's the brother character played by Daniel Durant, where he's angry. He's angry at her because, you know, she's like playing a savior to the family once again in his mind, you know? And that scene of them where they just kind of fight, they have it out with each other. It's loud without having any sound. Like it's you know, and because it's just such a great physical performance of the communication and the language and the slapping of it and everything. One thing that was interesting to me was that the second time I watched it, my wife was sitting next to me, but she wasn't paying attention. She was working on something else. And it's when you're invested in this movie, when you're watching this movie, it really does just feel like dialogue, you know?
Yeah.
And she was just like, this movie's very quiet. And I'm like, oh, I didn't notice. I mean, I really did not notice. I was really in it. And to me, these are people talking out loud, you know, even though they're not.
Yeah, right. Yeah, I really did get used to it. And it's interesting what you're saying, that like this time too, I noticed they're performing like they're yelling, like you get that, right?
Yeah.
Like you understand the emotion of it. And another thing is that like, a lot of times when movies are, you know, quote unquote, just about representation, there's a really sanitized version of that identity presented. In this movie, like Marlee Matlin's character is pretty awful for a lot of it.
Yeah.
Then we hear kind of like where some of that's coming from, but there's also parts of it that's just, she's sort of a vain person, like to an extent.
Right. You're with Ruby when she's kind of like, why is this all about you?
And that doesn't necessarily get resolved, but we do also see a really profound and unique perspective of a deaf mother and what it would feel like for her to have a child who was hearing versus what she kind of hoped or expected for having a child who was deaf.
Right.
And the reality that she'd never felt very connected to her hearing mother and was afraid of that for her daughter, if her daughter was hearing.
Yeah. And
then that scene where Leo really wants to be more a part of the community of fishermen, where Frank is content or has resigned himself to being disconnected from that. And Leo, there's that scene where he's trying to kind of laugh along, like reading the lips, but like there's just a verisimilitude to the lived experiences that if a movie were just about representation, I don't think we would get necessarily.
No, because I think a movie like that is so concerned with what are people going to think about this representation? What are people going to think about this identity?
Yeah. This is going to be what people think of deaf people, so we need to make sure we know like the message they're getting.
Yes. And what you get here is not that. You get just well-rounded characters. You know, I will say what this movie does really well is it lets you empathize with absolutely everybody, I think, in it. You know, the family. I'm going to stick with the family here. But like, you know, they all sort of have their own struggles. And what I also appreciate this movie is that the struggle is not just being deaf. Like the struggle is that they are fishermen barely eking out a living. Yeah. And that's a struggle. It's not because they're deaf that's the struggle. It's a struggle because that's the occupation that they have.
But they also introduce why that is harder for deaf people.
Yeah.
And that's real too.
Yes.
That they're like the Americans with Disabilities Act has tried to address some of that stuff, but there's still actually discriminatory policies against deaf fishermen.
Right.
And it just brings those issues to light in a way that is really way more natural than if you had described it to me. Oh, it's a teen coming of age story, but it also touches on how hard it is to be a deaf fisherman. I would have been like, this sounds really shoehorned and everything. But it does it like really well, like while also maintaining why this is difficult for Amelia. You know,
Ruby.
Yeah, Amelia Jones's character, Ruby. Because it's not just about like the savior sort of thing. It is though, like that is definitely part of it, but it's like my family could lose their livelihood if they don't have me there to interpret.
And I think she's very aware, and that's what kind of makes the argument with the brother is like, it's kind of like you see it from both sides because I think she's aware that she doesn't want to come off with that that necessarily.
Right.
She doesn't like being in that position. So yeah, I mean, I think that in a lot of ways, this movie takes those conventions and, you know, it doesn't just slap the representation on top of it.
No.
It sort of goes very deep into the very, what would often be, I think, kind of complicated family dynamics that actually that dynamic is very common. Sibling rivalry. I mean, that's super common. Or someone feeling like they don't quite belong in the family and another person saying like, of course you belong better than I do. You know, like those are all very common things. And so they could have just sort of like said, oh, they're doing that, but then there's also they're deaf. Like, you know, but instead it's just like, no, let's talk about how that exact, very like universal feeling would be the same, but also very different within this family that's got one person who's hearing and three people who are deaf.
And I guess that's part of what my negative reaction to the movie is that there's enough drama in that.
Yeah.
That they didn't need the extremely conventional teen drama of it. That like she didn't have to have all the other stuff going on for that story to be interesting. When it is about like the teen drama stuff, there are times where the emotion is there, but it feels so contrived and conventional. Even though I will admit that there were parts of it that I still connected with, you know, like for some reason this time, the first time it didn't, but for some reason this time when he makes her like make that ugly sound and then she starts singing.
Oh yeah.
Like it got me.
It did. I actually wrote that in my notes. I was like, the ugly sound part got me.
I said, God damn it, the ugly sound part got me.
Sounds like we had the same thing.
I was so mad at it because I'm like, this is dumb. But man, like, and I think that's Amelia Jones' performance,
so
her
good.
voice.
She's
like,
so good.
In that moment, it got me.
No, you're holding it.
I'm not.
Yeah, you're trying to sound pretty.
I'm not.
Yes, you are. Okay. You said when you started school, you talked funny. Funny how?
Talk like a deaf person.
What does a deaf person sound like?
You know.
No, I don't know. I want you to tell me.
Different?
Different how?
Like, wrong. Ugly.
Ugly. Okay, make an ugly sound for me.
What?
Come on. Yeah. You think you were the only kid who ever got bullied? Who ever had a funny accent? Look in my eyes. Push back in my hands as hard as you can. Push, push. Look at me. Make the ugliest, grossest sound you can. Come on. Ah!
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 Go! Be a monster!
Ah!
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 Ah! Now sing at me!
I've looked at life from both sides now, from win and lose, and still somehow.
Yes! That's it. That's it.
And of course, it gets you because of all the groundwork it's laid
Yeah.
up to that point, that you do get it. But yes, of course, it's like, and I'm like rolling my eyes that I'm crying.
Yeah, right.
I'm like, why am I crying right now?
And another, and this is like way more, I think, of an egregious fault of the movie, even though it's not a huge part of it. But it goes to these lengths to show the difficulty of being deaf in the world, the difficulty of being a child of deaf adults. Why did they have to have those broad and I think unrealistic bullying scenes?
In the school, you mean?
Right.
Yeah.
Like, why did they have to have that character?
Right.
We would have understood that already.
Yeah.
Even if she had just said, I have a hard time communicating because when I first started school, I talked differently from people.
Yeah.
That I feel like would get it, like, yeah, okay, I can totally see that without having this broad bully character who shows up and then is gone. And
I agree.
like,
And I also feel like, I don't know. I just kind of, it almost didn't seem that realistic to me that
no,
that
I
would
didn't
even
think
work.
so.
That like someone could be that much of a jerk.
And still be
even in high
popular.
school and have me understand high school dynamics and how high schoolers can be awful to each other. I get that. But that's a level of awful where I think in this day and age, most of school would be like, what the hell's wrong with you?
Yeah, right.
Like, why are you making fun of someone for having deaf parents?
Right.
Yeah. Like, and then she's popular.
Right.
And that's where I kept thinking there had to have been at some point maybe more to that story. Like maybe there was some kind of like scene of confrontation. Like what's going on here? Like why do you do this to me?
Yeah.
Because it is all just in that, like she's the only one that does it. Other people laugh. You're
right. Yeah.
But like it really only comes in those like kind of hallway and cafeteria scenes,
Yeah. And it also, I don't know, it feels like conceptually it's overwrought to be like, oh, this girl's a great singer, but her family will never hear it.
Yeah.
And they don't lean on that, of course, but it's just sort of like the whole singing stuff, that is where it feels algorithmic to me.
Well, yeah, because it sounds like you got a blank sheet of paper in front of you and you're like, I want to make a story about a girl who has to live with her deaf family.
Mm-hmm.
What would be like the hardest thing you could think of? Well, they can't hear. So singing and music is obviously, that's what I love about hearing.
Yeah.
Boy, that'd be so hard if that was your gift. Like it's just sort of, it seems like it does seem a bit contrived. But with that said, you're not going to get some of the most touching and beautiful moments of the movie without that dilemma, and without that contrivance.
Exactly. Yes, that's extremely true. That like where he asks her to sing it for her.
Oh my gosh. Yeah.
And that movie that scene is incredibly powerful because of that like sort of dichotomy. But then there's also the cynical parts of me that's like, well, people love a cappella versions of pop songs. Let's put that in this movie. Like, let's do the hearing folks a solid. Like. Yeah. You are going to have to read subtitles, but we'll put some real catchy songs in there for you.
And there was, I will link to it in the show notes, but there was a pretty good article that was written in The Atlantic that's called "The Tension at the Heart of CODA." It's by John Hendrickson, and the sort of subtitle in it says, "Even after 2 viewings, I'm still trying to answer a fundamental question: who is this movie for?"
Mm-hmm.
And I think that is a question worth asking, and he does a much better job than I think I will in going through it. So you should just read the article. But I think he kind of at the end of the day concludes after showing like some bringing in some other critics and people from the deaf community who have talked about the movie, that you can recognize the representation, you can be proud of it, you can see the achievements it's doing and the things that it's doing that film really just hasn't done or given these opportunities to deaf people before on the screen. And still at the end of the day conclude, yeah, but this was mostly a movie for hearing people. You do get the scene, I think, at the concert.
I was just thinking we need to talk about that.
You finally get what it would be like.
So that's an incredibly powerful
It's
and
a very
effective
powerful
scene, but it's also the scene that tells us who this movie's for.
Yeah.
Because for a deaf person watching that, That's
whole
not going to
movie's
look any
been that.
different.
Right.
And there's no like subtitle that says like sound cuts out, you
Yeah.
know. But I think that's okay. Like
That's
that's
okay.
fine. And
that was my feeling reading it. I was
Yeah.
like, I get what you're saying, and I think what you're saying is it would have been nice if we could finally have a film that really was by deaf people and for deaf people. Like, and honestly, I'm kind of like, okay, you know, you should have known your answer before you even wrote the article, because the movie's called CODA.
Yeah, right. Exactly. It's about Ruby.
being a child of deaf adults. Like
Exactly.
it's about Ruby. It's her experience. That's the movie. That's
Right.
the movie that's laid before you. But it's kind of like you're asking for a movie that this one never even set out to be.
Yeah.
You know.
Right. Exactly. And I think that's sort of like the Hamilton discussion we had. Like the movie is
Yeah.
huge
Yeah.
now and didn't necessarily set out to be the standard bearer for deaf movies, but because it's the first and it's a big deal, it is asked to be that, and it was never prepared to be or set out to be or should be necessarily. And there is part of it that, like, paradoxically to everything I'm saying, is the fact that it's a conventional teen movie is also important, because it's not a movie about being deaf. It works as a teen coming of age story.
Yeah.
Hearing teenagers can watch this and get just the same thing out of it as they could out of all of those rubber stamped Netflix teen coming of age movies. This one has deaf people in it, you know? So I was listing all of the hallmarks of teen movies that this movie has in it. And I don't know if there's a definitive list, but it feels like it gets most of them.
Checks the boxes.
And I actually kind of stopped pretty early writing these down. But I kind of want to ask you whether you think these are assets to the movie or problems with the movie or just irritations about the movie or however you would react to them. But the things I wrote down as hallmarks of a teen movie, I would say borderline cliches of a teen movie. The bullies, a secret spot in nature,
yeah.
a hidden talent, an outgoing crush who helps the main character out of their shell, a funny, brash friend.
Oh yeah. Yep. It's all there.
A friend and a sibling hookup.
Right.
And then a quirky teacher who believes in the main character. There were probably more, but I was at the bottom of the page and I didn't really want to continue that note.
Well, and I think the
next
question
page.
is, okay, so there's two questions. Do they work? We can go down that list and say, do they work?
Okay.
So the other question is, like, how much of that in this movie is something that feels contrived?
Yes.
And how much of it feels natural?
Yeah.
So I think actually of the list you gave, I'm going to say almost all of it felt pretty contrived to me.
Okay. Bullies. We already are on record
Contrived.
as saying contrived. Secret spot in nature.
I thought that was pretty contrived, though I think it does sort of function okay in the movie. I'm ambivalent about that aspect of it. What is it really? I mean, that's, I guess, where you as the viewers realize, yeah, she really can sing,
Right.
just when she's alone.
Mm-hmm.
And
She goes and sings Happy Birthday to Nobody at the quarry or whatever that was.
And hey, you know, we've talked about this in our Pitch Perfect episode, that I have kind of a love-hate relationship with acapella and how it kind of I was very squirmy in that scene. I was very squirmy in that scene.
I did think it was really funny when Gertie said, like, if you start doing the cup tapping thing, we're done. I thought that was funny. The hidden talent. Does that work? Is it contrived?
Well, in this movie, it has to work.
Yeah.
The whole movie centers around that.
I think it absolutely does. Yeah. Outgoing crush who helps her out of her shell.
Miles,
Talking to Miles' character.
Miles
here.
is just kind of a, what's the word I'm looking for?
A fart.
Yeah.
He's just kind of a nothing.
There's like I am not buying really any of the chemistry between
No,
them
I'm not really
at all.
either. Even though you loved Sing Street, which he was in.
I know. I don't mind. Maybe I don't mind him as an actor. I just
Ferdia Walsh Pilo. That's his name.
I just don't. Okay, so doesn't there kind of just have to be that in the movie? Like, are you really going to try to have a coming of age movie that doesn't have some kind of romance in it?
No, of course not.
You just got to.
But then he just disappears.
Yeah.
It's not like he drives her to college, which I also thought was a little bit strange. That goes on the list too.
Yeah.
It's like 2 hours away. Why didn't her parents drive her? It's not like she was going to California and they were like, "Well, we can't run our fishing
going to
co-op if we
Berkeley.
don't." Nah, she was just driving her.
Just driving her.
Like,
When they drove her to the audition, so obviously they drive.
Right.
I don't know. That was weird to me too. I guess they just needed the
But
moment.
you couldn't have that
you gotta
moment.
have the moment, And I'm there for the moment.
That was a good moment. Obviously with Troy Kotsur, Marlee Matlin, and Daniel Durant, they have a lot of experience acting with ASL. Amelia Jones doesn't. I thought she did a really good job acting ASL.
Yeah.
Like the way she holds her arm out for that. Like it's a really expressive way of signing.
No, I felt, and of course I don't have, I can't really speak to whether she's doing it well or not, but like it felt very natural to me.
Yeah.
And having to learn that. And then I also felt like when she did speak it as she was signing it, even her delivery of the lines vocally matched very well with what she was signing. I thought.
The funny brash friend.
I was that supposed to be some comic relief maybe in the movie?
I guess so.
You got plenty of comic relief in the family itself. I don't know that you really needed that character at all.
The friend and the sibling hooking up.
Didn't need that at all.
I don't know how old her brother is, but he's definitely out of high school and she's in high school.
It's questionable, yeah.
The quirky teacher who believes in her.
Well, of course you need it.
Right.
But there were moments that got me with that teacher.
Yep.
And there were other ones where I'm just like, oh, we're doing this.
Yeah, exactly. It felt like there were times where it was inspired and times where it was like, and this is what happens with a teacher like this in this movie. One thing that kind of, I guess you could say that this is also a trope of a teen coming of age drama, but it was something that I was bothered by. A teen unnecessarily keeping something secret.
Right. Well, that's the thing too, is I felt like she could have just been upfront with him at least.
Yeah. My family's starting a new business because this is what's happening here. They need me to interpret. In fact, they've got a really important TV interview that I need to interpret for. She never tried that. And I cannot believe that he would be like, doesn't matter.
Yeah. That's the thing is I kept thinking he's being really unreasonable, but then I was just like, but he doesn't know what's going on.
He doesn't know anything.
Even when she gets there and she's late, she's like, I got a lot going on in my life right now. And of course, like any teacher talking to a teen, if you don't know the specifics of that, you say something like, well, I do too.
Yeah.
Like we all have got a lot going on.
But I don't know a teacher who wouldn't say, you want to talk about it?
Right. That's true too.
Especially one who has seen her nights and weekends at his house.
Right.
I don't know. That's a contrivance that I don't think is working very well, but you need it for the story. Were there others? I mean,
there's some things that we're not even calling tropes, but they technically are, but they're just so beautiful you don't want to call them a trope. For instance, like that scene with her dad.
Oh, yeah.
You're going to have a scene in this where it's the sort of daddy-daughter kind of scene. Not in all of them, but even in a movie like 10 Things I Hate About You, there's like a very brief kind of touching daddy-daughter kind of moment. And those always get me. Always.
Yeah. And this one.
Especially. Oh man.
Unbelievable.
This one really, and that is like, okay, so much of that is in Troy Kotsur's performance. Like, because, you could have done that scene a whole lot of different ways. And it is just beat by beat, the emotion in his face, the way, it's just, that scene is beautiful. And I do think if this movie does have any life to it, like ongoing, it's going to be just sort of the iconic scene that is. Like that is a scene that I do think will just kind of etch into people's minds and might even kind of become its own meme-worthy kind of thing. Just the idea of a pickup truck with a daddy and a daughter sitting behind it, and the idea of putting your hands on the vocal cords, to kind of feel her talent and singing.
And the scene where she starts signing during the Joni Mitchell song.
Yeah.
That worked so much better. Like that whole climax worked way better this time for me.
Yeah. I just think that for me, what is really frustrating about this movie is that the family scenes are so damn good.
Yeah.
And then everything you just kind of listed is like,
right.
Just kind of takes it down a couple notches.
Right. But they also tend to be what people carry away from it because they're the pop songs. And that's part of what bugs me about it is that like, yeah, of course Joni Mitchell's going to get stuck in your head. Of course Marvin Gaye's going to get stuck in your head. That doesn't make that a good scene. Like, yes, Amelia Jones is a great singer.
Yeah. Of course, you're going to hear Starman and want to clap along too. But then it's kind of like, isn't that kind of the point though? That like the rest of the family doesn't really get to have that joy that you're feeling right now.
Right. Yeah. And, whatever. Could the movie interrogate that? Like, could it flip it on its head and say like,
I mean, it kind of tried by having that moment where the sound
Right.
comes out and you do kind of get the few seconds of hearing it from their point of view and then looking around and seeing how other people are impacted
Yeah, but
by
certainly
it.
not before you get to enjoy the moment yourself for long enough. Like I can imagine almost like a cruel filmmaker, like if like Michelle Haneke was making this movie
yeah, no kidding.
and like doing something to like really just take any enjoyment that you were getting out of it away.
And suck it out from you.
Yeah, and obviously
And be like,
that's
you
not
don't
the
get to
point
have
of this
that.
movie.
Yeah.
But like, so whatever. I can't criticize it for being a movie that wasn't made. But yeah, it's just that sort of like you had so much good stuff, and then you just padded it out with this really weak stuff.
Yeah, and I'm not even talking about just like things like the songs. I mean, like you talked about like the nature spot. Like I just have a hard time figuring out what that's doing other than we need some way for her to, I don't even know, like be alone to kind
Yeah,
of think
but would
things
it
through,
have
or,
connected with people as much if it didn't have those shorthand footholds to say like to orient you in the type of movie it is?
Yeah.
Right? Like would it have been way too disorienting of experience for people to be so broadly enjoyed?
Yeah.
So yeah, I mean, you always kind of have to weigh those things,
Right.
And the thing that I think is the best part of this is that those don't detract from the other parts. Like they don't cheapen them at
Yeah.
all. They're kept fairly separate.
And maybe maybe we need to clarify for ourselves, like, are those tropes in and of themselves a bad thing, or are we just kind of being like that because that's, again, going back to kind of the YA coming of age conversation. Like you could take a Western that maybe we both love.
Yeah, that the
And
tropes are like a big
and
thing. Yeah.
someone else could be like, okay, let's go down the list. Though
Yeah,
this one
right,
has
yeah.
this and this
Yeah,
and
yeah,
this. Does
yeah.
it work? Does it work? Does it work? And it's kind of like, well, it's a Western.
I've
What do
seen
you
it
want?
work and not work in Westerns.
Of course.
So, like you
So I think that's what we need
you
to kind
could
of like.
criticize it.
I think that what we're saying
That's
is
why we
we're
went
not.
down the list and we judged each of them individually. I didn't just say their presence made it bad because I think you can use tropes.
Yeah, so I think that's good. I mean, to clarify, and I think what we're saying that's kind of disappointing is that, and actually I would say it's like almost like a 50-50
Of those
like,
tropes, yeah.
Some of those tropes are like boilerplate,
Right.
average coming of age teen movie trope.
Yeah.
And other tropes, it's like, oh, this is actually very cool what they're
Yeah.
doing with this. And it's like 50-50. It's not like a good ratio where it's like, I love this movie except for this
Yeah.
one part. It's like, no, like half the movie is kind of
it's
this
just-
lame
yeah,
tropes.
yeah.
And the other half is like really stellar. you
Yeah,
know?
right. One of the tropes. So this one's sort of like, for lack of a better word, a humble brag criticism of a trope. But what did you think when you first saw her holding an album by the Shags?
Well, you must have known the Shags, I guess.
You don't know
no,
the Shags?
I had not really listened to the Shags.
Okay.
I got to be honest. And should I even say that on the air? Because I like to kind of, I like to kind of like think of myself as sort of someone who knows a lot of music.
The Shags, yeah. Well, they're like anti-music music
Okay.
and your favorite band's favorite band sort of thing. Like,
Well, so does this kind of have this? That part to me kind of smacked of like Juno,
yes.
like Diablo Cody, just sort of like. It's not virtue signaling, it's like trend signaling.
Yeah.
Like
No, absolutely. Like when I saw her holding a Shags album, I was like, oh, they're really trying to paint her as this super artsy, quirky girl. Because, I mean, the Shags are like Daniel Johnston's influences.
Okay.
Where Daniel Johnston is weird and influenced people. Like the Shags were like the weirder version of all of that.
Yeah.
Like
So you're watching it almost
atonal,
you're watching almost like, all right, calm it down a little bit.
Yeah,
at least make it
absolutely.
like Velvet Underground,
Right,
maybe,
yeah,
or
yeah.
like
Yeah. So that's a deep cut trope that is like, trend signaling. Definitely like culture signaling.
yeah, where it's like most of this audience is going to be like, I've never heard that band, so it must just be some cool band I've never heard of. And then the people who know it are going to be like,
Oh, she
oh
likes the
wow,
Shags.
she likes the Shags, pretty cool.
And then the people who really know are going to be like, oh, she likes the Shags. Yeah.
and that would be you.
Yeah, that would be me. That would be me and maybe 3 other people who are just miserable bastards. So, end of the day, I do not begrudge this movie winning Best Picture. I don't begrudge the Academy for choosing this for us to watch. I am extremely moved by Troy Kotsur winning. So I feel like it's a weird spot to say I thought this movie was just okay, but I'm glad it won Best Picture.
Yeah, I'm not I'm not upset that it won Best Picture.
Right.
Not nearly as upset as I have been in the past with some Best Picture winners. And even
or if Belfast had won.
Yeah, sure. Yeah. But at the same time, I know you were saying you're not upset that it was chosen and that we had to talk about it. I do kind of I look at the other lists and I'm like, I would have.
There were other stuff I would have rather rewatched.
I would have loved to have rewatched that. I would have loved to have talked about that movie with someone.
Yep.
And then CODA won, and I was happy for CODA, but then I was like, now I got to talk about CODA.
I felt like I didn't have as much to say.
I don't have as much to say about it. I really don't, because.
It's fine.
It's fine. It's the kind of movie that, how much do you need to say about it? You know?
Yeah. I will say this, even though I would have said it's not one I would have watched again, and I will say probably I won't watch it again. I am glad I watched it again.
Yeah.
I did feel differently about it this time. I think part of that was I knew it wasn't going to be more than what it was.
Well, I'll tell you one thing that solidified for me watching it a second time that I was appreciative of is the first time I watched it, especially that third act, there's 3 scenes where I'm crying, and you watch it once and you have that experience, and I like to have a good cry at movies and things, and but then later you're kind of what was I just in a mood that day?
Yeah.
Or sometimes you're like, was that just a really manipulative kind of movie? And what solidified it for me the second time was, no, those are just genuinely moving scenes, and they're done very well, and they're actually not done in a manipulative way most of the time, because, like we said, there's a lot of times there's no score. The camera's not doing some weird trick or editing trick or whatever. It's just, these are people performing very well, scenes that are just touching.
Yeah.
Those emotions that I got watching it were real. They weren't sort of manipulated or fabricated.
Right.
It was actually just as emotionally impactful as it was the first time watching it.
Yeah. So, it feels like we're on the same page here.
Yeah, I don't know. I said my first watch I had it at 3.5, and I think I'll probably just.
I think it
keep
stays
it at
there
that.
for me. Yeah, and that's we talk about this a lot. Usually, when we rate something at 3.5, I think we usually say this, that's not a bad rating,
right?
And it's not to say that somebody else couldn't have it higher or lower, whatever. It's just that's a solid movie. That was a movie.
That was a movie, and
it was
how you feel one way or the other. I'm not going to have much energy to fight you on it. You hate that movie? All right.
Okay.
Yeah, I can see that. You love that movie? Yeah, there's some stuff to like about that movie. Yeah. I guess we're best buds on this.
On that. Yeah. We kind of were unimpressed by the same things and impressed by the same things.
Seems like it for the most part.
Yeah.
And I'm sure people who are listening to this episode are going to have opinions. So, we'd love to hear those. So should we, I guess this kind of wraps up CODA. This is a nice little coda to our CODA.
Yeah.
Had to make that joke at some point.
Yeah.
So I got it in there. Good.
CODA is a musical term, if you weren't familiar. It's about the ending section of a piece of music.
So appropriately, as we are wrapping this up, let's enter our CODA of this episode and talk about what we're going to discuss in our next episode.
Well, for the next episode, we both had fun with coming up with the definitive movies.
Yeah, episode 100.
Oh, that's right, 100.
If you want to go back to the archives and listen to that one.
Yeah.
Because before that, we rarely ever did topical kind of
podcasts. We're gonna come back to that idea, come up with a list. This time we're each gonna come up with 3 movies. We're not shooting for the moon of 5. This isn't a 100 episode again. But we're gonna talk about we're calling it overlooked movies. So for whatever reason,
in our opinion,
right? For whatever reason, you think this movie deserves a bigger audience or another look, or more people should be talking about it, or whatever. I think
what's wrong with everyone,
right,
is kind of where I'm coming from.
Right,
I'm seeing this thing. It's amazing.
Right.
I'm the one who's right here. You're all wrong. What's going on?
Why is everybody so awful? And how am I the only good human?
Yeah. We'll keep it nice.
Right. But that's kind of the vibe.
That's right. Antagonistic. Yeah.
Not to keep bringing the Oscars back because our contractual duty is done, but that's always the case. You see the Best Picture list and you're like, bah,
Yeah, what the heck?
Snubs. Flubs.
Right.
So we're not going to call it a snubs and flubs.
No, this is overlooked.
So this is just overlooked movies. And it could be anything. It could be that the movie has a performance in it that you don't understand why people aren't talking about it or remembering it, or just a whole movie. Or it could be the movie got really bad reviews or audiences didn't flock to see it and you just don't understand it.
Right.
The parameters are wide open on this one.
We're going to be this is kind of us being the prophets in the wilderness kind
Right.
of episode
Yeah.
where we're screaming to you saying, I can't believe more
Yeah,
people
what?
don't see this movie
Yeah.
the way I see it.
God
Yeah.
will strike you dead.
That too.
Right.
I mean, I could definitely see it going that
It
way
could.
because, these are movies that, for whatever reason, are overlooked, and
Yeah.
we're trying to rectify that.
Yeah,
and
we
say
are.
that's wrong.
Do the Lord's work.
Get out there and see these movies.
Right.
Seek out.
Seek ye
See-
these
That's
movies.
right. Yeah, that's the prophetic talk we're talking about.
Yeah.
Yeah. And we're going to rewatch these movies.
We are, yeah.
So,
We'll
Ryan's
share
going to
the
give me
list.
his
We'll
list.
be-
and
we'll be-
yes,
yeah.
so we can hopefully bring some even newer insights into them. And hey, maybe it'll be like, okay, now I see what everyone's saying. And,
Yeah,
yeah.
we might pick it and then rewatch it and say like, I used to think that, but yeah, everybody was right.
It'll be fun either way.
Yeah.
I think it's fun
It's
times.
just fun.
Good times.
It's just
fun.
fun.
Times.
And so obviously we would love to hear movies that you think are overlooked.
I think
for
everyone's
whatever
got 'em.
reason. Oh yeah.
And beforehand, give us your titles. Ryan, do you want to kind of run through some of the ways people can reach out to us?
Yeah, to listen to or comment on this or any of our past episodes, find us at canwestillbefriends.net or email us at feedback@canwestillbefriends.net. You can find us on Facebook at Can We Still Be Friends Podcast or Instagram at Can We Still Be Friends Pod.
If you'd like to leave us a voice message and perhaps be featured on the podcast, call us at 847-306-9532 or email us a voice memo. As always, we'd love it if you could subscribe and leave us a rating or review at Apple Podcasts. Those ratings really do help spread the word about this show.
And Can We Still Be Friends is written and produced by Ryan Ebling and Nate Goss and edited by Nate Goss. Thanks, as always, for listening, and we'll catch you next time.
See you later.